Now that we have steps 1 and 2 done, it's time to complete step 3. Step 3 is my test statistic. And when I calculate my test statistic, I calculate two things. It always starts by calculating SC, my estimate of my standard deviation, which for one mean is S over square root of n. In this case, when I plug all of that in, I'm going to get 0.045, and if I'm rounding it to 2 decimal places, that'll be 0.05. Once I've gotten this, the next thing I need to do is go ahead and find my t-score. I'm using t because A, I have an average problem, and also because I have such a small sample size. To find t, I take my actual, which is 5.065, subtract off my expected, which is 5.1, and divide it by my SC, 0.05. If you're plugging this into a calculator, make sure you put the top in parentheses. When I go ahead and find this value, I'm going to get a negative. In fact, you're going to get negative 0.6 and 9999999 repeated. When we round that to 2 decimal places or even 3 decimal places, it'll be 0.70. Our next step is to go ahead and find my p-value. And to find my p-value, I need to go ahead and insert the t-table in so we can look at it. Now, the first tricky part of using this t-table is to realize that the negative here doesn't matter. And the negative doesn't matter because we're doing a less than, which is a lower end, which is exactly the same as finding an upper end. So, finding below negative 0.7 would be the same as finding above positive 0.7, which is why when we use the t-table, we just ignore any negative on it. So, I'm going to go ahead and find where my degrees of freedom is, and this is degrees of freedom 3 right across here. And the next thing I'm going to do is, ignoring this negative, I'm going to look for what my t-score is. So my t-score here is 0.70. So looking across here, I don't see a 0.70, which means 0.70 is going to be closest to just this lower one here. That is, I can't border it in between anything. Because it's on this side, the next thing I'll do is I'll go ahead and I'll trace it to the top. If I trace this 0.70 up to the top, it would have whatever my p-value is. I'm going to trace the one next to it up to the top too, which is 0.765. And so when I trace that to the top, I get 0.25. And if I trace the 0.7 up, I'd get my p-value. Now, as I look across the top here, 0.25 is bigger than 0.2, which is bigger than 0.15, which is bigger than 0.1. That is, each of these is greater than the one after it, which tells me if my p-value is over here on the left, it's actually going to be greater than 0.25. So to recap, once again, I had a negative t-score, but that's entirely fine. I can just ignore the negative because the upper is the same as that lower. So ignoring the negative, I look for it on the table. It's too far off the left, so I just take the one closest to it, trace it to the top, and my p-value, because it's on the left, is greater than 0.25. The final thing I need to do is go ahead and state my answer. So when I reach my conclusion in step 5, I always compare my p-value to 0.05. Well, because my p-value is bigger than 0.25, it's definitely bigger than 0.05 here. This tells me that I can go ahead and fail to reject. That is, there's not enough evidence here to conclude that the machine is actually doing less than what it should be. This is not saying that the machine is accurate. All it's saying is that I don't have enough evidence. Those 4 glasses we looked at weren't enough to reach the conclusion we wanted.